your end if you can't see the slides. But we're just about to kick off, guys. So the question on the board is pertinent to our topic today, and it's asking you to reflect on when you last said no to something that when you last said yes to something that you should have, in hindsight, said no to. Why? What was going on? Were you worried about backlash? Were you worried about your career? And you can see the other ones there. And you can tick as many of those as apply, because usually there's more than one reason. So that there will be posted in the chat to get you to do, because I'm going to now start to move on. So Eleanor, if you can just make sure that question is posted in the chat, or the QR code. So absolutely delighted today to welcome you to another Women in Research topic, and another very, very popular topic, which I think very much reflects the state of academic life today, is how challenging it is to figure out what to say yes and what to say no to. I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm and my team, we are on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And please feel free on the chat to share the lands that you're on today. Today we've got two fantastic female laureates joining us. We have ARC Laureate Fellow Hongxia Wang, and also ARC Industry Laureate Fellow Sarah Bekessy. And I think, Sarah, you're our first industry laureate to join on Women in Research. So I'm super excited and thank you to both of you for joining, and I'll introduce you a little bit more later. I always forget to advertise the next session because I have this slide at the end, so I've moved it forward. So our next session, and the registration details are in the chat, is all going to be a bit more about what leaders and organisations can do in this space of creating a better world for female academics. So super important that we don't always individualise this problem and make it about us, but also what leaders and HR people and others can do. So please join in for that session. So let's start with why this topic matters. And I think we all know why it matters, and that's why we're here. But just very clearly, just very quickly, you know, I think many of us say yes too often for the wrong reasons. It's fine to say yes, but we should do so with intention and thought. If we do, we unfortunately can get overwhelmed and burnt out. And, you know, ARC Laureate Fellow Maureen Dollard, who's shared, and some of her colleagues have shared their research on academic burnout in the Women in Research series before. And what we know is that academics are extremely burnt out on average. And I believe it's something like, of all the different jobs in Australia that they've surveyed, academics are about the third worst. So, you know, this is a disturbing statistic. So it's real that people in this profession are getting overwhelmed. So, of course, if you are saying yes too often, it can distract you from what you really need to be doing for your career, for your job, and so it can affect your performance. It can also just become dissatisfying because your day gets clogged up with things that you think, oh, why did I say yes to that? And I guess there's this big phenomenon where we always forget that when you say yes to something, you're actually saying no to other things because it takes time. And so there's always this opportunity cost when we say yes, and that's a bit invisible, I think, sometimes. Equally, we don't want to say no too often because, you know, then we become that person who everyone thinks of as narrow and doesn't help and doesn't do anything, or it can hurt our career because we're not exposing ourselves, stretching ourselves, learning, seizing some of those random opportunities. And there can be some backlash from colleagues and bosses. So, and it can be, in the end, dissatisfying because the job becomes too narrow and a bit too similar. So what we've got to do is learn how to say yes with intention. And we had lots of beautiful questions on this topic. And I'll just read a couple of the ones that came through. Questions from you guys. You know, how can one effectively prioritise research projects when everything seems urgent and important? Different people have conflicting ideas about what it is valuable to say yes to, and this can make it hard to identify the best course of action. How do we sort through this, and so on? So lots and lots of questions about figuring out what do we say yes to. And I guess this comes, I want to use my bucket metaphor, and I did a crafting workshop just last week where we talked about this bucket metaphor, but, you know, and I've talked about it on Women in Research before. If you've got a bucket and you've got rocks and pebbles and sand, big rocks and of different sizes, how do you fit your most? How do you fit the most in your bucket? Anyone want to put a little answer in there in the chat? I'm just seeing, looks like people can hear us, that's good. How do you fit the most in the bucket? Start with the big ones first. Thank you so much, Sagda. So if you want to fit a lot of things in, you know, and I always think about this when packing to go on holidays, put the big things in first, because then you can put the little things all around it and you can fit more in that way. So the problem is if we're not being intentional and we fill up our calendars with lots of things that we're saying yes to, and they're the little, you know, they're not the big rocks that we need to be doing, like writing our academic papers, then our bucket just gets full with other things. Unfortunately, some of those questions about how do we decide what's important, no one can really answer except you. And that is, you can get advice, you can get thoughts. But the reason that no one can really answer this question of what should I do is because it depends on a number of factors, and you're the best person to judge those different factors. So your career stage, what you should say yes to when you're in an early career stage is very different to what you should say yes and no to when you're in a later stage of your career. But really the most important thing about what you're saying yes and no to are your goals. What is it you're trying to achieve in the short term and in the long term? And you can take into account what is it that energizes you? What is it that interests you? What is it you're passionate about? What's important to you? You can take those things into account too. So absolutely get advice from others and thoughts and tips. And today we're going to give you some advice and thoughts. But the real meta advice I'm giving today is that you need to think about those questions, what is important to you, and you need to develop your own criteria for what you're going to say yes and no to, and then apply that with intention. And I'm going to say that quite a few times as we go through the session today. Somebody's asked if we can enable live captioning. I don't know if we can do that. But look, the session is recorded if anyone is struggling. And so, you know, if you can't hear, you might be better to tune into the recording a little bit later. But Annika and everyone, you can hear okay? So we're still okay on the sound? Great. So I just found this thing, 5 stages of saying no. And I thought it's from someone called John Berardi, and I must admit I don't know who that is. But I thought it was a little bit useful in that it just highlights, and I link this to career stage, like when you're in the earlier stage of your careers, you know, often any opportunity that comes along is great because you're wanting to learn what you like, what you care about, and you can't do that sometimes unless you give it a go. You know, do you like industry work? Well, who knows unless you give it a go. Do you like media? You know, so in your earlier stages of careers, being really open to opportunities is important. You know, it doesn't mean you need to say yes to everything, but you're probably more likely to say yes in the early stages of your career. And John identifies this, you know, second stage is, well, unless it's a hell no, everything's still a yes. I'm not saying you should say yes to everything. I'm just saying that at that stage of your career, you're more likely to say yes, and as you get more overwhelmed and busy, because inevitably, as you progress through the ranks, there are more expectations of you. Also, you develop your reputation and your esteem, and that means people ask you to do more things. So for that reason, when you're getting to the mid-career and late career, often you have to be much more discerning about what you say yes to. So mid-career, you can choose a little bit more. And then, and this is not true, of course, this is on average. Often you get to the point where you're really saying no to most things, unless it's too big to pass up. So career stage makes a difference, and that's why I'm suggesting you be thoughtful and absolutely seek advice, but always recognise that many factors play into what you should say yes and no to. So the most important thing, and I said I'd say it a lot and I will, is to be intentional. But that is really hard. And I'm going to go to Annika now,
Yes. Hello.
who's going to share the results of the poll. I don't know if we got enough people doing it, Annika, but let's have a look and see.
Yes.
Do I need to stop sharing, or can you just bump me off?
Let me just try. Can you see this?
Oh, yes, it's coming up. That's great.
Yeah. Okay,
great,
so
great.
we actually got quite a few responses, and they are clustered into what got the most.
Great.
Yeah, people mostly are worried that there could be a good opportunity that they're missing out on, closely followed by that they really feel like they want to be helpful for others. Also, they're worried about saying no could hurt their career. Some people felt flattered to be asked in the first place. Some are worried about the backlash from the person asking of being disapproved or being excluded, or there being consequences. And then lastly, there are the 2 points that it would take more effort to say no than yes, or the project is already still in a far future. So it's easier to say yes to it. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Annika. And that's great. So those things that we ask you to reflect on are deliberately the things that I'm going to share some thoughts around, because I think we need to understand why we sometimes are not intentional. Because if we can understand that and we can have some ways to deal with it, that will help us be more intentional. And as I do this, I unfortunately won't have time to read them, but as I do this, if you've got any tips for addressing this particular issue, do feel free to pop it into the chat. So, and I'm just going to do these in the order, not the order of importance, but the order that I had them listed on the slides. So the first one is that worry about backlash from other people, disapproval, or you'll never be asked to do anything again, or these sorts of concerns. I think the first important thing, and we're actually probably going to discuss this a bit more in the questions, is to check the legitimacy of your fear. So there's a difference between worrying about that, and there's a difference between that actually happening, maybe happened in the past, and so on. So I think the first thing is to recognise sometimes it's more about the worry. If it's happened in the past, I think then there are different strategies for dealing with it, and we'll come to that perhaps in the question session. But that's the first thing, is there is a difference between our fears and our worries and reality. And if it is just fears and worries, then maybe try it out, right? And using some of the tips that we're going to give you, and check it out, test your hypothesis. It's important to be assertive and clear, which can include saying no with grace. And I'm going to talk more about some ways we can say no, which can help potentially with some of the backlash. And it can also just help you feel more comfortable. I'm going to come to that a little bit later, so just hang in there for that. But if for example, this has happened already and it's the same person, it's a boss or something, and you've said no in the past and it's caused backlash, I would encourage you to seek help from wise mentors or senior women or others in your organisation, because you know, there's a lot of subtlety, and it would be really good to get some good guidance on how to deal with that, because it is in the end discrimination and should probably be treated quite seriously. Second one I want to talk about is worrying about careers. So, and particularly this idea, because it's really hard, isn't it? It's really hard to figure, and I still struggle with this now, to figure out, is this a good thing for my career or is it a waste of time? And so I think really all you can do here is have those, oh, people are saying the sound is disappearing. I don't know what we can do about that. I think others can hear, so I'm just going to have to proceed and hope that it's on the recording. It could be because we have a large number of people on the call. But just, I think this is where we come back to being really clear about your priorities and write them out, stick them on your computer, do whatever it takes. Some people have acceptance criteria. I do that with projects, like I will only accept projects if they meet particular criteria. And they're not all about my career, by the way. Some of them are about, I want to like the people that I'm working with. Well, think that they're going to be good people to work with, because we all know that working with colleagues that are not very effective or whatever can actually cause more stress. So what are your acceptance criteria? You might want to write those down and stick them up somewhere. And of course, get advice from others. Not so many people tick this one. I personally think this one is probably something that affects you as you get towards the more senior end of your career and you're just overwhelmed with so many requests. It can actually be really quite exhausting to say no, because for two reasons. One, psychologically, it's harder to say no, and I'll talk more about that in a second. Also, if you just get so many decisions to make, you do get this thing called decision fatigue, where you just end up saying yes because it's far easier to go, yes, I'll do this, than to write your email politely saying no. So I don't know whether anyone has experienced that phenomenon, but certainly I think as you get more senior, that can sometimes be. Oh, a question for me, examples of acceptance criteria. So I gave the one of, if it's a project, it's got to be working with people that I, like if it's someone inviting me to collaborate and I've already collaborated with them and I didn't find it a positive experience, I would say no on that basis. That's because that's my criteria and that's valuable to me. In another circumstance, it might be a famous person and you're a young researcher and you might say yes, even though that person you don't particularly like or whatever. So that's what I say. It's what's important to you. But, you know, sometimes I also have a no new project until one's finished rule. So these sorts of things. So yes, it's easier to say yes. So some of the things that can help with that, 72-hour rule. Don't say yes for at least 72 hours. Sit on it a little bit, because I think, again, a lot of the time people will ask us and in the moment it just seems easier to say yes. It can be quite hard to say no to someone, especially if they're asking you face to face or they've come and approached you specifically and they've said how great you are, all those wonderful things. So you might say, look, I'll come back to you, so you can distances. I think one of the really important things is to routinize saying no. So what do I mean by that? I mean, you have your standard scripts for it. For example, me, you know, journal reviewing. If I'm on already editorial boards or I'm an associate editor or an editor of a journal, I'm not going to do additional idiosyncratic reviewing. No way. So I have a standard email that I use to say no. And I have a few other standard emails. That's what I mean by routinize saying no. Make it easy for yourself. Carefully construct that email and then use it when, you know, if you get repeated requests for something that you just want to say no to. It's actually okay not to provide a reason. This is a fundamental premise of assertiveness theory, that you can just say no. Now, when I come to saying no, yes, I learned somewhere that no is a full sentence. So you can just say no. You do not have to give a reason. I am going to suggest, though, for people who struggle to say no, that there are ways that we can say no that that are a bit more elaborate than just saying no. And I'll share those with you shortly. Oh, well, this was the number one, wasn't it? There's an amazing opportunity that I might be missing out on. So again, you have to be clear about your priorities, apply the 72-hour rule, and seek advice. All of the things I've already said. Sometimes one way of handling this is if you see something and you think it could be a great opportunity, but you really don't have time, think about, is there someone else in your network or a colleague who might benefit from this opportunity? You might say no in a way that keeps the door open for the future. So you might say, no, I'm so sorry, I can't join your project team, but we're doing a symposium on this topic and I'd love to invite you to be part of the symposium so we can keep the connection, or something. It doesn't have to be that, but you can say no in a way that doesn't discount, because sometimes people want to say no for the moment, but in the future they'd love to do it. So you can be clear about that. I came across this idea on the web of celebrating JOMO, which is the joy of missing out, which what the suggestion here is that after you've said no to something, you should actually really privately celebrate that, and allow yourself to sort of say thank you to yourself for saying no, and experience that joy of the time that you've reclaimed. So yeah, Tamara loves the idea of JOMO. So let me know, Tamara, how it works out. I think it is a great idea that we just so quickly move on sometimes, and we forget to say, actually, this week I could have been in that conference that someone invited me to speak at, and that would have been 2 weeks of my life. And now I've got 2 weeks at home, and I've got 2 weeks just to focus on my writing or whatever. I also came across this idea of the iceberg yes, and I thought this was I definitely fall prey to the iceberg yes. And what that is that we often focus on the visible, exciting part of a request. I've been invited to be a keynote speaker in, I don't know, the Gold Coast. Oh, wow, I get to go to the Gold Coast, and isn't this going to be wonderful? And we underestimate the stuff actually that's beneath the iceberg that's quite a little bit less exciting, preparing the talk, the chats with the organisers beforehand, flying there, all those things. That's just one example. But so the iceberg, yes. Do you fall prey to the iceberg? Yes. The second top one from Memory Annika was, I really like to be a helpful person. And isn't that great? Because we need helpful people in the world. But that can, if you like to be a helpful person and that is part of your identity, that can make saying no even harder. So this is where saying no gracefully, which I'm still going to come to in a minute, is important. And I love the tip that I first saw in Adam Grant's book, Give and Take, where he always shared this idea of saying no, but offering something else instead. So you might say, no, I can't be, unfortunately, the reviewers now force you to suggest someone, but, in the old days, you used to say, no, I can't review the paper, but you might try my PhD student, da, 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 da. Or someone might invite you to collaborate. You might say, no, I can't collaborate, but I'd love to, connect you with someone I can, or I'd love to share with you an article that I think might be useful. So it's a 2-minute yes to them. Instead of a 20-hour, 30-hour one. You're still being helpful, but you're also saying no. So I think that is an incredibly valuable thing to do if you are the sort of person who likes to say yes. Sorry, just need to stop my phone. I do think we need to be mindful of gender differences too, because we all know that women get asked to do different tasks often. Women get asked to do the citizenship tasks more than men. We also know from research women say yes more to these tasks. We also know from research that women do not get rewarded in their career performance reviews and so on as much as men when they do those tasks, because it's expected that women will do these tasks. And we've covered that in other webinars. So look at those if you're interested in this. So I say be mindful of that, because we want to be helpful, but we also don't want to be exploited or just always doing tasks that our male colleagues are less likely to do and less likely to step up to. The next reason some people say yes when they should say no is it's just a long way in the future. Now, I'm super guilty of this. I do this all the time. And this is actually related to this psychological phenomenon that we all engage in called time discounting, which is this tendency to value the immediate and undervalue and underestimate the long term. So we overvalue, oh, it's so easy to say yes right now, and we discount the time and effort it's going to take in the future. Actually, this topic is investigated in areas like retirement. It's why we're not very good at retirement planning and so on and so forth. So be aware of time discounting. We also have psychologically this thing called optimism bias, which even though we might be currently overwhelmed and busy, we do tend to overestimate our future capacity. We tend to think in the future everything's going to be okay and we're going to have lots of time and resources. So just be aware of those biases. And I love Turia Pitt, some of you might know, has written this book called Selfish, but in a way she's basically saying we need to be more selfish sometimes. And she asked this question: if you're asked to do something and it's months in advance, ask yourself, if it was next Tuesday, would I feel great about this or would I be dreading it? And if you're going to be dreading it in a week, that's a pretty good clue that you are discounting the future, and maybe you want to say no because it will come around.
Sharon, excuse me, but I'm not sure whether that's the same for everyone, but we cannot see you right now. Could you maybe turn your camera on and off for a second?
Oh.
We can hear you perfectly, so if we can't fix it quickly, maybe Isabel or Elena can in the back try and fix it. Okay, now I can't hear you anymore. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything.
Annika, do you want me to give my talk?
I'm really sorry about this. Isabel, could you maybe check what's going on, please?
Annika, could I step in and give my talk in the meantime?
Yeah, probably, yeah. We are fixing
Yeah.
it.
Let's wait a minute, and if she's not coming back, we can move to you, Sarah.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just trying to be helpful.
Yeah,
thank
Sarah,
you.
go on, please, because I think we have an issue with Sharon's computer, so yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome to start your talk.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Not at all. Hello, everyone. My name's Sarah Bekessy. I'm a professor at RMIT and was very lucky to recently be awarded a ARC Industry Laureate Fellowship, which, I mean, I must say that one of the things that I felt really worried about, which perhaps is a sense that we all feel in our careers, is a bit of imposter syndrome. And I feel it kicking in pretty strongly now, because whilst I have been very lucky to receive this Laureate Fellowship, I'm actually not very good at saying no. And in fact, when I told my colleagues and my students that I was giving this talk, and they literally laughed in my face, which is not very nice, but probably accurate in that I don't know. I hope I'm going to be able to give you something today from what I think about the idea of saying no to things. Because clearly saying no, as Sharon so clearly pointed out, is that it's really important to carve out the time that you need to do the things that really matter, the things that give you joy, the things that have real impact in the world, the things that, boy, you need to do to keep your job and to have a sort of sustainable career path. I think there's an easy list of things that we probably all should say no to, and it would be quite nice to share this list and to build on it. But Here's mine of the things that I definitely say no to. There's not many things, but let's just say I don't do media on topics that are way outside my expertise. And it's amazing how many times you get asked to do that. I don't work with truly unethical industry partners. So, I do work with a lot of industry partners who I don't absolutely feel values aligned with, but those that I can just sense are using my research to kind of essentially greenwash, I try to avoid that. I don't do things like book chapters and conference proceedings because I think that whilst we are kind of all pushed in that direction quite often, sometimes even by our supervisors, they're not high impact articles. They're read a lot less than other types of articles, and often they take precedence and you kind of have to prioritize them over other things you'd actually quite like to write. Certainly don't say yes to editing a special issue of a journal, which you do get asked to do more and more as your career goes on. Just say no. I don't say yes, or even sometimes I don't even respond. This is a bit mean, but I have a lot of emails from prospective students who start the email with "Dear Sir." Yeah, there's a lot of probably a list that we all have of things that we as academics just all should automatically say no to. But seriously, though, it's very hard to say no to many other things. I remember a really lovely and fantastic academic colleague, Lily Van Eden, who started at RMIT about a year or so ago. And she came to me, and it was her first week of work, and she had nothing in her inbox and her calendar was empty. And she's like, "This is fantastic." And I wonder how long it took, but it really wasn't very long before her calendar was utterly smashed and her inbox was completely full. It's almost like there's something about our time being occupied almost fully by the academic life if we let it. So one thing I wanted to say is that I think it's very critical for all of us to find strategies for our mental well-being to cope with and not to lacerate yourself when it comes to being slightly neglectful. Because the reality is we do the Dear Madam ones. I love that, yes. But yeah, Dear Sir is worse. But yeah, I think we need to work out strategies for thinking I'm not going to lacerate myself for being a tiny bit neglectful with something, because that is almost an inevitability in an academic career. I think perhaps we'd all agree that at some point in time, you've got a list of things and you know that you should have done half of them and you haven't. And somehow we need to work out how to make it okay to sort of be a teensy bit neglectful. But also, it's kind of critical to work out how to prioritize our time. Now, I don't know that I'm very good at this, but the things that I have learnt that might be useful. One, to think about when are you most effective, literally in your day. What is the time of your day where you are thinking clearest and you can really do great work? And for me, and this is the opposite for my partner, I am about 6 a.m. So I get up, the kids are still asleep, and I have between about 6 and 8 a.m. where I can really think clearly. And I have a list of things. This is probably one of the only strategic things that I do in my day, a list of things that are probably thinking tasks that I try and do in that time. The rest of the day can be meetings and boring and administration and things that don't require as much mental energy. But working out when in the day do you think clearest, I think is really important. And then it's, what things are you going to prioritize? What tasks are you going to prioritize? Now, for me, and everyone's different, I think, as Sharon rightly pointed out, firstly, there are two parts to it. One is, what are the things that I feel best about doing? So the things that are fun, the things that give me joy and hope and satisfaction and impact. And then on the flip side, it's the things that I also would feel the worst about not doing. So in reality, that means that I prioritize, teaching, because I love it and I think it's really important to be there for students. PhD students, postdocs, industry partners, the boards that I'm on, and making sure that those organisations are operating right appropriately and with effect. Advocacy, because I really enjoy advocacy, and impact. They're the things that I've really chosen to prioritise, and that means that probably there are things that are still on my list that are deprioritised, and often for me. And I'm not saying this is the right thing to do at every stage of your career, but that's things like first authored papers. So I don't have a lot of first authored papers from the last, few years, and that's because I cannot prioritise them over the work of my students and my postdocs. Now, that is not the way that some academics operate, and I think we probably all know, and I'm going to say it, I'm going to sound terrible, but middle-aged white men who have successfully operated in their careers by really prioritising their own work, their own first authored papers, and they are heralded often, and then they have so many awards. I know someone who actually has someone employed to help them apply for awards. Now, that's not my priority or my approach, but that historically has been what's been, I think, rewarded in academia. And I'm saying that the system probably needs to change in a lot of ways. It needs to change to recognise impact, recognise service. And I think and maybe lower down the list is actually your own kind of your own pursuits that are kind of maybe a teensy bit selfish, if I want to say, like, doing your own first order papers and your own awards and so forth. And
Thank
I think
you,
what gives me
Sarah.
real
I'm going to have to, sorry, Sarah, I'm back online.
Disagree.
And apologies for the mess. Thank you so much. I'll probably stop you there because I want to allow a little bit of time for questions. But I love how you've talked about, some things you've got to say yes to are things you're passionate about and bring you joy. But you also have to say things that are important. They might not bring you joy, but they're important, and you've valued them and identified them as valuable. So thank you so much for that. Let's and guys, I'm sorry that I had a problem with my computer, so sorry for that, but didn't probably get a chance to introduce you guys. I'm not sure. Did anyone introduce?
No,
I do want to say that Sarah is our first ARC Industry Laureate Fellow. So Industry Laureate Fellow that we've had. And she is starting in 2025. So we're super thrilled that you've been able to come on, Sarah, and hope you come back for some more. And she does amazing research on urban design and biodiversity and research and practice, of course, as she's the industry laureate. I'm now delighted to introduce Hongxia Wang, ARC Laureate Fellow, Hongxia Wang, who is also a scientist and very recently was made a Fellow of the Australian Technological Science and Engineering Society. So congratulations, Hongxia, and thank you for coming on. And can you just share, again, keeping it fairly brief, your tips for what to say yes to, what to say no to?
All right. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, so I echoed with what has been said by Sharon and Sarah. Sometimes it's much easier to say yes, much harder to say no. So my strategy of saying no when sometimes I have to decline, the opportunities is, so I would like to, number one, to list the most important things for for me, for my career, for my family, and even for my capacity. And so therefore, based on that, I would then think about, if I have to say no, what's the consequence would be? How would that influence, what I said, my career, my capacity, and my family? Because I still have a young family, have a young kids. Even now, I have to say no to some, conference presentation opportunities. Although they sound great, but I have young kids. I only attend the conference which just during the school holidays. Even now, I still do this way. And when you say no, also you need to list, does the outcome of the decline opportunity would significantly damage your relationship with your colleagues or with your peers? So therefore, I feel it is important to to be mindful of the communication method, because we always want to maintain very good relationship with people and in a very collaborative way. So if you can't do things, maybe offer people alternative options to, let them know, why you can't do it. But keep your door open to say in the future, I maybe, want to, work with you again in a different event, in a different, ways. So I think these are important. Overall, I completely agree with what has been said by Sharon. It's always about yourself, you. So, don't think too much of what other people may think about if you decline the opportunities. Mainly about you, how you think of yourself. How would this, say no influence you, your career, your family, and also your capacity? Because we don't want to be burned out. We need to maintain our, mental and physical health. It is critical. I think that's I would like to share. Are you unmuted?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Hongxia. That's terrific, and really reinforcing, that in a way we so quickly can categorize ourselves as selfish, but in fact we need to make those decisions that are good for us and our friends and family. So thank you so much. We're going to go to questions now, and I've actually just asked Annika to ask the question that I didn't get a chance to cover. So we'll do it that way. But guys, there will be some more tips on this in the slide. So over to you, Annika.
Yes. I can also share the slide that you
Oh,
didn't
yes.
get the
Great.
chance to.
Excellent.
1 second. Can everyone see this?
Just go ahead and ask anyway.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the question was, how can you say no gracefully, basically?
Great. And I guess, as I said before, it is fine to just simply say no. And as someone beautifully said, no is a full sentence. I love that quote. I will remember it. But, you can also add some extra things if that helps you to say no. So you can express that you are honoured or grateful to have been asked, so thank you for thinking of me. There's that is a nice way to begin. You can show respect for the ask. Someone's asking you something, it might have taken them quite a lot of courage to ask you. So you could say, the paper sounds great. It really sounds interesting, but, I don't have capacity or whatever. Actually, someone suggests this strategy of I don't, and whether you say it or not, but it's actually useful to think about what is it that you don't do. And I think this becomes particularly important as you get more and more requests for things. So, for example, I have decided I don't do talks at conferences unless I'm the keynote. That sounds like I'm sort of trying to be grand. It's not that. It's because I'm trying to maximize my time impact ratio. So if I'm a keynote, then there's going to be a lot of people in the audience. But if I'm just doing a talk, there can be 10 or, and it's not a good use of time, right? So, and I just, after yesterday, have added another new thing I don't do. And it's going to be, I don't do panels. Because I'm also finding that a lot of time and effort goes into sitting on one of these panels, and then you literally talk for about 2 minutes. And it's not, again, a good time effort ratio. Those are not recommendations.
So Sharon,
for
are you
everyone.
saying that perhaps we should have said no to this panel?
Well, no. So this as I was giving that example, I was thinking, oh no.
Just joking.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you guys for saying yes to be on this panel. I think one thing I would just add is if you can offer that there's this idea of this yes, no, yes strategy, which is very similar to the one I've said before, and the yes, no, yes is you say yes to yourself and prioritizing what's important to you. So that it's okay to say no. That's the yes. And then, but no, I'm not going to do this. And then the yes is, but yes, I will help you with this, or I will offer this. So it's similar to that strategy that I said before. I just want to say one last thing before we go into the next question. And that is the importance of being wary of giving an excuse Because you can just say no, you don't have to give a reason. But if you do give a reason, be wary of the situation where you give a reason that someone can then come back on, right? So I want to give a personal story here once where this guy asked me out. This was when I was much, much younger, and I did not want to go out with him. And I had been doing assertiveness training. I'd been teaching people about assertiveness and this idea, you can just say no. So I said, instead of saying to this guy, oh no, I'm busy, or oh no, I've got a boyfriend, both of which, he can come back on, well, what about next week? Or, when I don't have a boyfriend, I just said to this guy, I said, no, I don't want to go out with you. Full stop, right? The problem with this strategy, this is a detour, sorry guys. The problem with this strategy is he just loved the fact that I was such a confident woman that I could just say no like that he then continued to pursue me. But my point is, be careful of any, if you say, no, I'm busy, just watch out, because then people can say, okay, I'll come back to you in 2 or 3 months.
When you're not busy.
Yeah, so it is okay just to say no. But those are some tips, I guess, just for saying no in a way that might feel more palatable to you and might prevent some backlash. It may not. But I don't know, Sarah or Hongxia, have you got any other tips? And then I'm going back to you.
Yeah.
I'll shut up now.
For me, so I'm not a person who is good at saying no, but quite often I would offer people an alternative option if I can't do it. It's not don't want to give people the impression I don't want to do it. It's more like I can't do it. Then I explain to the people why I can't do it, and maybe there's other people who is able to help, or maybe more better than me to help.
So you're still offering something back. It's just not you doing it.
Yeah.
Sarah, do you have any tips on that one?
Well, I mean, maybe I put a counter argument forward, which is that, someone just said to me before I started this talk, saying yes begets success. And, there's an element of truth in that. If I think about the colleagues and students who I most like to work with, probably like Annika sitting next to you, she didn't say no to helping you with this session. And I think in some respects, they're the people I like the most, the yes people. And they're the ones who I really want to work with and promote and feel fantastic being in a team with. And so I think the problem is that we need to work out good ways of actually rewarding the yes people, the people who are actually, because I think there are a lot of people in academia, and they are mostly men. I think that's probably not an unfair statement, who are very good at guarding their time, saying no, and they don't contribute to culture and excitement and fun in the workplace. They have never organised a seminar series or a morning tea or a team retreat or anything like that. And so I feel like we actually need to, there's this whole thing called lean in or something, which is about women having to become men to be successful. Well, what I would like to see actually is academia, it's not leaning out, but actually shifting to become more aligned with how good and healthy workplaces should be, where everyone is rewarded for being someone who says yes to actually helping create great team culture. So there needs to be
Sarah. Yeah. And I think, this is a beautiful topic. I think we could pick up in our next one, because that's more about what leaders and organizations should be doing, including what is rewarded and what is valued in organizations, because that's fundamentally part of the problem here, is that some of those behaviors are not rewarded. But let's just go on to another question now, Annika, because you've been working on the questions and we've got to get some time to get through them.
Yeah, we have 4 pages of questions, so we can't answer all of them. But there was one big topic around feeling guilty, and even you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that maybe sometimes that's not reasonable, but sometimes people also face consequences. So do you have any tips on how to manage when there are actually consequences, when people bully you or exclude you from something, or once you've asked and said no, they never ask you again, kind of situation? Sarah, maybe you want to start?
I think Hongxia had a good response to this.
Oh, yeah. Okay, then we go to Hongxia.
And so the first thing is you know, is you just worry or fear some consequence like bullying might happen, or it's just something has happened, you know, it's real. So I think that's the big difference. If it's something you are fear of, and quite often, you know, I don't, you know, we are in Australia working hard, you know, bullying is definitely, you know, unacceptable in any workplace. So so you can talk with the person, you talk with your supervisor of your fear, of your worry. But if something is already happened, and I'm sure so each organization would have a proper way for dealing with the conduct, you know, the misconduct like this. The best would be you report, and you know, if you are new to the organization, not sure, and ask your supervisor, report to your supervisor. Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, and also following up on that, what if it's the supervisor, or if there's a power difference? A lot of people were wondering how should they deal with that when they're in a lesser position, so to say. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it
Sarah?
probably, yeah, sorry, Hongxia, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So, you know, quite often we want to maintain a very good work relationship with our supervisor, right? So, if your supervisor asks you to do something you feel you can't do it, or it is, you know, outside of your capacity, I always feel the best way to decline some request while maintaining without damaging the relationship would be through communication. And you know, talk to your supervisor, just say, you know, you want to help, you wish you could help, but you can't, and why? And you know, alternative ways and to help out. Yeah, that's the strategy I usually use. Quite often I feel, yeah, and once we reach a good understanding, you know, you can, so it reach, you know, without doing the things, but still you maintain good relationship. Yeah.
Do you also want to share your thoughts?
I guess just if the supervisor is the issue, this is where we go back to, like, if your supervisor is excluding you or something because you're saying no, or whatever, then, you know, this is where you probably should get some more senior support from someone, because that is not appropriate behavior from your supervisor. So, yeah. And you know, these are complex scenarios to navigate in 1 minute, but get some support, I would say too. Yeah.
Sarah, do you want to add anything, or should we move on to the next question?
Maybe the next question.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it'll be our last question.
Yeah. So there were a few questions about family balancing and prioritization. So how to balance the caring responsibility and the work pressure, and essentially how to prioritize this in terms of saying no and yes to the right things. I believe, Sarah, you wanted to say something about that.
Crikey. I mean, you know, I have to say I probably prioritize my family like they're right at the top of the list, to be honest. You know, if I get a phone call from the kids' school and I'm at work, I answer it no matter what meeting I'm in. And I find that I probably have really prioritized picking them up from school. I mean, they're beyond that now, they're in high school now. But attending my kids' events and things, like I have actually prioritized that. I'm really sorry, Sharon, if this is disappointing you.
No, that's good. And you know, people do things differently, right? So, and that's fine. And that's really the point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I also think that my kids, I was actually, you know, lying in bed and having a good night chit chat with my son last night, who's 13. And I was telling him about giving this talk, and he laughed in my face about me because he thinks I don't say no to enough stuff. But you know, he said, "Oh God, Mum, you're always working." And you know, anyway, I think, yeah. How do I kind of balance that? Well, I think I probably just always put the family at the top, to be honest. But there certainly are times when you need other people and you need your village, you need your partner, your mum, whoever it is that you've got in your life to actually really help you. You you know, I mean, for example, when I wrote my Industry Laureate Fellowship, I was actually in hospital with my mum who was sick and actually dying, which is really sad to say. But she was helping me
Oh, wow.
write my fellowship and thinking about partners and who was good and I think, I don't know. I don't have a solution to this family space, but all I think is you've only got one life, and I don't want to be someone who has neglected the most special people in my life when it comes to, you know, the end of your career. I think it's sort of actually a really important thing to find space for if you possibly can.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing this also very personal story. For me, it sounds a little bit like just have your own boundaries and stick to them and decide, right? Like, would you agree with that?
And that was, I guess, the meta message I wanted to give at the beginning. I'm not, just to be clear, advocating we just say no to everything. I'm advocating that we say yes and no with intention. And in other words, personally, it's very valuable to me to help people and mentor people. And I would always try and prioritize that. That's important to me. So that's part of my acceptance criteria. But at other points in my career or other people, that might not be so important. So to me, it's about being intentional. It's not about saying no to everything, because I fully agree with you, Sarah. What a world that would be if all we all did was prioritize our own narrow interests all the time. That would be. So it's just about being intentional in a world where many academics are overwhelmed, and getting tips on that is important. But in the end, it does come back to your own reflections about what is important to you. And Sarah sharing that you've always prioritized your family. That's fantastic. And that's part of your intention when you say yes and no, right? That's part of your thinking. And I think what I was trying to say with my earlier tips is, I think the problem comes when we say yes and no for the wrong reasons, when we're not got that intention. We say no because yes or no because we fear the consequences, or it's so far in the future, or whatever. So I think that would be the final message that I would end on. But let's have in the last 1 minute, let's have 30 seconds from you, Sarah, final message from you, and then Hongxia. Sarah, final message from you.
Okay, my final message would be, don't worry about being someone who is a yes person, because I think they're the people who I personally value the most. And I think the kind of comments that I got on my Laureate Fellowship really gave me a lot of hope, because my career, I'm not a kind of middle-aged man who's prioritised first all the papers, and it was recognised. It was recognised that I've done so much service, that I've actually mentored students and staff really effectively, and that I've had impact beyond academia. And so that, to me, was a really sort of strong reason to say yes to those things, and not to always just say no and focus on the kind of really core, what we always consider to be academic reward tasks.
Beautiful, thank you. Hongxia?
My final message would be, so don't be fear of saying no and decline some opportunities. Always prioritize what's most important for you at that stage of your career. Based on this, then decide what's the best for you to say yes, what's the best for you to say no.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, guys. And I hope that and by the way, I love yes people too. Thank you so much, guys. Our next one will be more about what we can do systemically, as leaders in organizations, what should be rewarded. So please hope you can join, encourage others to join. Sorry about the technical hitches, but thank you for bearing with us. And thank you to our wonderful guests, our laureates, and also the team behind the scenes, of course, Isabel and Eleanor and Annika. Thank you all, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And we will see you all soon.